Hello, welcome to the COVID in the Kelley Classroom, Finding Motivation During the Pandemic webinar. This is the first in our Kelley IUPUI Alumni webinar series brought to you by the Kelley School of Business Alumni Association. My name is Amber Richards and I am the Alumni and Parent Engagement Specialist, and we hope that you all are doing well. We're so glad to host this opportunity to connect and engage with Kelley alumni, specifically IUPUI alumni. And we are excited to announce that we will continue hosting Kelley IUPUI focused webinars into 2021, starting in February. These webinars will continue to feature amazing IUPUI faculty and alumni-led discussions on timely topics. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today. Her name is Brittany Schellist. She is the president of the Kelley Student Government at IUPUI and is a marketing major. She is an upcoming Orr Fellow at Off-Prem Technologies after graduating this spring. Welcome, Brittany.
Thanks, Amber. So happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today moderating this event and interacting with different Kelley alumni, and it'll be crazy in just a few short months. I'll also be an alum. So I've absolutely loved my time here in Kelley and all the great opportunities that the school has to offer. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's introduce our two panelists for today. So we have Kyle Anderson, who joined the Kelley School of Business faculty in 2008 and has taught economics, statistics, strategy, and marketing at the undergraduate and MBA level. He has served for 12 years on the Indiana Business Outlook panel, which is the economic forecasting group for Indiana University and the Kelley School of Business. Kyle is the program chair for Kelley Evening MBA program in Indianapolis. He has his MBA and PhD from the Kelley School of Business and his bachelor's degree in economics from Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. Prior to his academic career, Kyle worked in healthcare and heavy trucking. And up next, we have Charlotte Westerhaus-Renfrow, who is the Associate Faculty Chair of the undergrad program and an Assistant Clinical Professor in the Department of Management and Business Law at the Kelley School of Business, where she teaches undergraduate and MBA courses focused on team dynamics, leadership, negotiations, and cultural intelligence. Her educational credentials include an undergraduate degree in journalism and a master's degree in higher education administration from Ohio University and a JD degree from the Mars School of Law, Indiana University. While attending law school, she was the first African-American female to be admitted to the Indiana Law Journal and served as assistant editor. In addition, while still a law student, she clerked for Indiana Supreme Court Justice Brittany Dixon. So to start off, we do have some submitted questions that I'll go through, and then please feel free to use the Q&A function to insert any questions that you may have as well. Awesome. So the first question that I'm just going to start off with for Kyle and Charlotte is, how have you guys found motivation during this pandemic, and how has it really affected or not affected your teaching styles?
Well, Kyle, I'm not sure if you wanted to start it first or I wanted to start, but what do you want to do? We didn't even hear that
Charlotte.
part.
I want to hear your perspective first.
Well, my perspective is from the undergraduate perspective. I do teach one course in the MBA, but most of my teaching is in the undergrad, and a lot of it is in I-Corps. So congratulations to everyone who's viewing. You've all got that in common, I-Corps. And when I look at motivation, there's basically two types of motivation that I'm fascinated with when I'm engaging my students, and that is the extrinsic motivation. People who are motivated by show me the grade, right? And so you keep that going. And I think much of this is a traditional way, showing folks their grades, how they're doing. But that's been challenging because the curriculum has had to change based on the hybrid model. So we had to change our curriculum. We had to adjust it. And I actually even think in some ways, people, they talk to one another. They have expectations of I-Corps, and all of a sudden I-Corps changed. And so we had to change it a bit. We still have high standards, but those who are just motivated with the grade, if you don't see the professor as much, it's hard to gauge how you're doing until you get the gauge. And that means we've had to get a lot more feedback to our students on how they're doing for those who are motivated that way. Now, those are others are motivated because they want to be there, intrinsically motivated, but they're not there. And so they miss the students. And they miss the daily contact with the faculty, and we only see, half their faces. And if they're really engaged in student organizations, this has been a real bummer. A real bummer for them. And so what I have done and other faculty have done is we have to stay in contact a lot more, answer all questions that come our way. We have to be much more upbeat and optimistic. They're asking us questions about their future and what's going to happen. We have to gauge their, I would say even their mental state, their Zoom fatigue. Sometimes they share things happening within their families that are pretty tragic. So we have to have a lot more empathy in order to keep them motivated. And I will just say this, I think the biggest thing is that we have to be motivated. We have to see this as an opportunity. As faculty, if we come across as dun, 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 well, our students will feel the same way. So all that being said, motivation is key, understanding how our students are actually, what motivates them. But it has been a challenge and it has been a shock on the system. And I am happy to report that for the vast majority part, our students are Kelley strong, and they've done a fantastic job staying motivated through this very trying period. Kyle, what about you as far as what's happening in the graduate MBA area?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you said. It is absolutely true for our evening MBA students as well. Motivation, I think, is high because, and one thing, anytime there's some economic turmoil, I think people really come to maybe even more appreciate the value of a strong business education. You think about things like leadership and understanding strategy and how markets work. They're really being put to test right now. I live in downtown Indianapolis. I go down to the city market for breakfast or lunch on a regular basis. And like it's like a perfect like market of what's going on. And unfortunately, demand has kind of dropped down there. You're seeing like some stores closing, like all of these challenges that our students are facing in their businesses and in our businesses are, if anything, they're increasing motivation, but then there's these other outside forces that are really kind of dragging on them. And whether it is the Zoom fatigue and I'm at home all day on Zoom, and then do I want to attend class at night? And so we really have to, I think it's, engage with our students in a different way to kind of keep their energy and intensity level up.
Yeah, and then just to kind of go off of that, do you think it's more difficult for students to focus over Zoom?
Oh, absolutely. I'll jump in and say definitely, because in the classroom, I'm one of these, when I'm teaching, I'm pacing around the classroom, right? I'll go and if I see somebody who's not engaged, suddenly if you're standing right next to that student, he or she's going to be paying a little more attention, right? And, in a Zoom environment, we certainly are trying to do things, right? Whether it's breakout rooms, whether it's polls, it's turning the camera on and having dialogues, small groups, all those things that work pretty well. But, if it's pretty easy for me in a Zoom session to maybe turn my camera off, or I can maybe, have my phone right here where you can't see it and, be checking Twitter or whatever it is that's going on there. So it definitely, I have, our classrooms are usually a good classroom experience can go for 2 to 3 hours and you can have an engaging class. I think people's attention span on Zoom is just much shorter.
Mm-hmm. And even in undergrad, it's still about an hour and 20 minutes. And so I have to make things a lot more, I call it punchier and shorter and much more concise and clear. I also have to interject things that are happening in the news or get to know my students and see who's really into the Colts. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. We're having a good year. And I try to do this. We have a couple exercises early in the year where we learn a little bit about one another. And I keep these notes. And the hardest thing about this environment, as far as being motivated and Zoom, is at least when on hybrid, I can see them. I usually have something called show and tell, where if you're brave enough to show your face the first 3 minutes of class, right, you might get more participation points. And they're getting into this. Those are intrinsically motivated. If you just show your face for the first 3 to 5 minutes, I will note this, and I can see all the names, and we have ways of I actually take pictures. I don't have to do it that way. But when I take that picture, and I mean, and there are some folks that look like they still have they just rolled out of bed, but they would click on in just those first 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just trying things to let them know that I do miss seeing their face when we go back into, the hybrid mode where we have them in class and they only have half their face. And some of the students have done some crazy things with their names when they click on. So they know that they're Colts fans, so they'll put their favorite player or whatever. We might be talking about a certain philosopher or a certain concept in business or management, and that's their name for the day. So I try to make it fun the first 3 to 5 minutes. Now, it is a serious course, and I am serious about grading, but I'm just trying to get them engaged. What is it? What is it that they watch a lot of on? Oh, you know what I'm talking about, the little flips of things. Help me, Kyle, on social media, TikTok.
TikTok. Brittany can help you. I think she's much more likely to.
Well, I don't do TikTok in class, but I understand why TikTok is so extremely popular right now. It's quick. And there are times within the course I have to make things just a little quick and fun until I get to things that are much more sustained. It's challenged me. It's really challenged me. And I just keep thinking, how would I feel if I sat across on the other side of the screen? As you said, Kyle, I probably have, our phone is always here. We have that. Some of them are not in the best situations. I've heard. I mean, they're studying on kitchen tables. They're studying in broom closets. They're studying outside of high schools to get Wi-Fi. It's hard to stay engaged when you really have some dire circumstances. Some of them, in order to learn. And one quick situation. Those of you who take I-Corps, you're on a team, and one of the teams were complaining about one of their team members who would never show his face and didn't seem that engaged. And it come to find out, he lives with a family of about 12 siblings, and it's really noisy. And he never knew who was going to say what in the background. And once we had a little facilitation, they began to realize that this was not just Zoom fatigue. It's just certain situations make it hard for our students to stay connected, and they don't have the confidence to share that online. But it has been very, very challenging. Yeah, Zoom fatigue is real, and it's real for faculty too. I mean, it's real for us. As Kyle said, we get energy from seeing our students and walking around, and seeing this flat screen it can be difficult at the end of the day.
Yeah, something I found some of my professors have done is some of them will start the class just playing music just to kind of get us more excited, or even in the middle of class, take, a 5-10 minute break, get up and walk around. And I found those things to be very helpful as well. So with people having a more difficult time focusing over Zoom, have you noticed any grade changes compared to before the pandemic?
I'll be quite honest with you. I have noticed that if grading with my traditional rubric, some of our students are not doing as well. They're not doing as well. The focus is not as well. Mostly the timeliness of having assignments posted it's not not doing as well. That's for some of the students. Team dynamics has suffered a great deal, because before, when you were on campus, you stayed on campus and you can hang out with your I-Corps team. You can get to know them when there is a break between classes. You can go out to lunch with folks and you see them in and out of the classroom. And that lack of connection has affected team dynamics, especially in the ability to resolve conflicts. Now, I know some of you were stellar students and you never had a problem on your I-Corps team, right? You always got along with each other. Really smiling too. You know what I'm talking about. The skill set to resolve conflict in this virtual environment is one that we are all learning. I tell them constantly, I am so amazed at their abilities to deal, as Kyle was mentioning, the tensions inside the team and tensions outside in the world itself. So I do think, yes, the team dynamics for some of the teams, there are some teams that are going full blast. They're doing very, very well. It seems to me it's like a bell-shaped curve, where before most teams did well and only a few didn't. Now I have exceptional teams that are struggling, And there's teams in the middle that are just holding it together. And even if they're holding together, I still admire them. I still admire them. And for those of you who are employed, it's hard to work up with a team pre-COVID-19. You know how difficult it's been working with a team in this Zoom environment.
Yeah, I think, and Charlotte and I, this is another area where we have kind of a little bit different perspectives, because I teach more quantitative courses. So a lot of what I'm doing is data analytics and economics and those kinds of things that I think are a little bit easier to teach in an online environment, because it's not team dynamics as much. And so if I want to teach somebody, how to do a technical analysis, a regression model, those kinds of things, video works pretty well for that. I know that, my students are out there, they're looking at it on YouTube and how to do these things, right? Like that's a really good, video is a good format for learning those kinds of skills. And then, it's taking it the next step to the application that becomes a little tougher. I find that, so I think overall, the students I have are doing pretty well in terms of grading and being able to pick up the knowledge and apply it. I think it's more work, it's a little bit less engaging. And one of the challenges that I think we all have as faculty is it's kind of as a statistician, I would say the left tail of the distribution, right? Like those who are kind of falling behind, they in a normal learning environment where we have classes that meet in person, they'll show up a little earlier and reach out to me, or they'll stick around after class and kind of maybe sometimes sheepishly come up and say, well, I'm really lost here, or and I'm not getting those signals in the same way. And so now I have to, I'm more likely to see it in a homework assignment and says, yeah, you're really not getting this, right? And that's fine. And so it just changes some of those dynamics that as faculty, we're constantly having to be aware of, okay, who might be struggling, where in a classroom setting, it's a lot easier to identify some of those folks.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question we have here is, do you see a women's recession trend in education? For example, where women, especially working mothers, are putting career plans on hold or withdrawing from the workforce to attend to increased demands at home for childcare, kids schooling, etc. If so, what are your strategies for addressing it?
And Kyle's more of the economic person than I am, but actually, this question was interesting. I'm being honest. I tell my students when I'm actually reading from notes, because you can't hide it. But I did find, and Kyle, I know you know the statistics on this. I found this devastating. Between August and September, more than 1 million workers aged over 20 dropped out of the labor force. Out of that 1,000,000, 865,000 were women. That's 4 times as many men. And the reasons make sense intuitively. I mean, they're in high contact jobs, working in the service industries, they're working in the restaurants, they're working in the tourism, retail. So the hit is they probably weren't making I wouldn't say not a high income anyway, and they got knocked out, just wiped out. I mean, their employers are closed. This is not a furlough, and they're not even looking anymore. The issue of childcare. Not only having, usually if you had to work at home, your children would be at school, but they're not at school. So you're working from home, and most of this is falling on women to actually be the quasi support of the children and their learning in this environment. And that's been devastating as well. And then if you needed childcare, a lot of childcare providers are now closed. So your children are at home and you're watching your children either in school or taking care of them. This goes across whether you're single, single mom, whether you are married. Women are basically taking most of the care. And then I look at women of color, particularly, who basically have always been on the lower end of pay, all things being equal as far as the job and requirements and ability. And it's having a devastating effect. So as we were actually, I think, making progress for women in the workplace, as far as the types of jobs they had, breaking through some glass ceilings, cracking some cement ceilings. COVID-19 has. And so for suggestions, I did a little research I was reading, but I'm gonna do some, I think, this common sense sorts of things. We've got to, and maybe with the vaccine, we've got to keep workers safe, because if workers don't feel safe, they're not gonna go to work, even if they have to, because they don't want to bring it home to their family if they have children. So we've got to get it to a point where kids can go back to school in a safe environment. The teachers and the children are safe for women and men to feel good about their children going to school. We are one of the few countries that doesn't have a federal level law that guarantees parental paid leave or paid sick leave. And if you have to take care of a child or a family member who unfortunately may have any kind of illness, and even devastating as COVID-19, you have to drop out of the workforce, mostly women, to take care of those who are ill. And you don't have parental paid leave. And there's companies who have it, but it's not a guarantee. And so all this is disproportionately having a really negative effect on women. And as far as short-term solutions, until we can get this COVID-19 situation resolved to a certain point, I don't see a lot of short-term solutions, but I am extremely worried, because in this area, I would say one thing I think that it does give us opportunity is for more women to go back and get additional education. This hopefully will prompt those who are in those high contact skill areas to say, okay, this isn't going to work. Things have changed. Maybe we'll never get back to the way things were for some of these industries. I need to retool, all right, my skills, perhaps go back to business school, so that I would be in a situation where, yes, I can work for a company that has the kind of benefits that can take care of me and my family in case something like this happens. I can be in a situation where I have more control as far as working from home, right? And maybe we'll have a job where a lot of our business students actually work for employers where they actually have some childcare or childcare on site. So there's a gray cloud and there's a silver lining. I can tell you it was the recession, and I won't tell you what year, you're not gonna know my age, but it was a recession that made me go back to school. Or I shouldn't say, yeah, actually I would say made me think hard. After working 10 years with a bachelor's degree, it was a recession that made me go back to get my master's, and then 3 years later start my law degree. So that is the silver lining. I hope that a lot of women will take a look at and go back and retool their skills. Kyle?
Yeah, Charlotte, you make all great points, and I agree with every one of them. As an economist, we are definitely seeing women disproportionately affected in the labor force. And that's a significant trend, whether it's, taking care of children, taking care of elderly parents. Those roles just tend to disproportionately fall on women. And also, as you mentioned, Charlotte, the certain sectors of the economy that are getting hit the hardest are ones that have more women in them. Now, we're not really, fortunately, I think those factors would definitely impact higher education, but we're not seeing those numbers. We've been bringing in this fall and winter, we brought in the highest proportion of women into our MBA program that we have in a long time. And having said that, it's around 27% of our program is women. So we're still severely underrepresented in what we should be. But just a couple of years ago, that number was 14, 15%, and now it's at 27. So we're trending in the right direction. And it's so important because, A, women need those opportunities, but B, also, whether it's corporate business or small businesses, like we need women in there. We need women's perspectives. We need that diversity, right? We know that boardrooms need, more women to have a higher functioning corporations, right? We need more women entrepreneurs because they'll focus in different areas and bring different products and services to our economy. So I'm the chair of an MBA program, so I believe in the value of the MBA, but I do think that we are have a purpose, a mission to get more women business education. And that's it's good for them, but it's good for our economy and our society as a whole to have that transformative experience. And like Charlotte, there is, it's not just anecdotal or your particular case. It is economic turmoil, economic uncertainty is often a motivating factor for people to go back to school, further education, build their skills. And so, I'm hopeful that this will, as the economy recovers, what we will see is people saying, hey, this is good. I'm glad I have, this job and these skills, but how can I, propel myself further and how can I build up my skills and my education?
Great, thank you. And then let's see. So what are some strategies for managers that are used to working alongside their groups and are now forced to do everything remotely?
I'm gonna let you go first, Kyle, on that one. How that?
It's a significant challenge. We've got we've got our MBA team that we're meeting all the time, but we haven't seen each other in person for what are we talking about, 9 months now?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think there's so much value in what I think of as hallway conversation.
Yeah.
My faculty colleagues and I, when we're thinking about, how we get things done and how we organize a program, my mode of operation would be go knock on someone's door and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or I'm thinking about that. To set up a Zoom call and do that just, doesn't seem the same. And that's something where maybe good IT systems, if we're all on the same, whether it's using something like Slack or some dialogue, some place where we can keep things together, I think is helpful. But, our team has been very much in setting up regularly scheduled Zoom sessions, cameras on, let's look each other in the eye and say, hey, what's going on here? What are the issues that you're concerned about? And it's not really, it's just about maintaining those relationships and continuing to build the relationships and trust across your team to, make sure that things get done, because those things we're not well designed to do that online, and email doesn't build trust, right? What builds trust is face-to-face interaction, and Zoom can kind of help with that. It can serve for a proxy for that, but you have to work at it a little bit.
And I agree with that, with you, Kyle, 100%. And as you were saying, building trust, I encourage managers, all the things you're saying as far as the communication, have some empathy, and have empathy by asking questions, and maybe off when the Zoom is over at 5 minutes later or 10 minutes, say, I want to talk to you for about 5 minutes. So how are you doing? And make it relevant. I have, I'm not going to tell who it is, because Kyle will know if I name what position or where they are. But two things happened, of course, that were related. I mean, this past summer, with the social justice, the Black Lives Matter, I have a grown son, and a colleague I really respect, but kind of report to as well, said offline, how you doing this summer? Seeing that, I know you have a son, so how you doing? And this person is not African-American. I was first shocked. I was like, whoa, and basically said, I may not understand it, I may not get it, but this must be really hard. And we probably would have talked about that in the hallway, right? We probably would have talked, because, faculty, we tell you what we're thinking about all kinds of different issues. And then I was sharing my parents are getting over COVID-19, and I would have not shared that unless this person asked, so how's your family? And so if you're a manager, you have to ask those types of questions and be ready for the answers that may come as far as being supportive, because these are the types of things that happen in the hallway that you would talk about. One other thing I also want to suggest is, since you can't see, if you're a manager, the folks that report to you, you can't see the activity. And sometimes there are some managers, a little on the micromanagement side, who want to focus on activity. I suggest managers focus on outcome. because there are some folks that maybe get things done a lot faster in this virtual network, but you have to trust that they can get it done. And so focus on having clear goals, clear objectives, where before a lot of times you measure how active you are, your activity. So I say focus on that. And then we keep saying this thing about Zoom fatigue, but it's real. It's so tempting when you know people don't have to drive into work and they have that extra half an hour or that hour to schedule Zoom meetings from 9 a.m. to 4 or 5. Can I get an amen, Kyle? I mean, seriously, we have some days. And so I suggest, and there he goes, I have a little puppy. I would suggest that as much as you possibly can, give some time out between the Zoom meetings. And just where people can just exhale, okay? And during this environment of virtual networking, we're getting emails from everywhere. I think the emails have exploded myself. I'm getting way more emails, and they're really, really focused with attachments and things you have to review. Give people time to digest all of that, all right? Because it takes more time because people are using their network more often to communicate. And then of course, just make sure they're doing okay. And if you can, give them that weekend to decompose, depending on what jobs you have, because they do need to decompose because there is so much stress going on because of the COVID-19 environment.
Great, thank you. Another question we have here is, how is online class attendance compared to in class?
I think it varies depending on the instructor. My attendance has been fairly good, but it's because how I structure my rubric and how I reward people and what happens. I have a lot of activities, experiential activities that happen even in the Zoom rooms. So you have to be there in order to get points for various assignments. So I teach an honors class, and my honors students, they're really experientially motivated, and they go to class. But the attendance has not been, I don't think as good, but it has not been markedly different for my classes because I knew this was going to happen. So I changed my rubric to make sure that there were things that we would have to do, that you had to be in class in order to be able to go into various, group chats, group rooms, whatever it is, breakout rooms, and you had to work with your team. So I course set up in my class that there's lots of team dynamics. And also I actually have had some really good students when someone wasn't showing up. They do peer evaluations and they would let me know earlier than later. And it's not like, they're snitching on anybody, but they wanted me to let me know that someone's not coming to the meetings, someone's not pulling their weight. And so I've been asked to facilitate some interventions with teams. And once that's happened and they break the ice and they have the skills to resolve it, their attendance goes up. So I have not noticed in my classes a great diminish of attendance. However, there are some faculty who have, depending what time of day it is, depending the sequence they are behind certain classes. And I know here at Kelley, we're doing everything we can to respond to that, to make sure that the class sequence makes sense and that attendance is not being affected based on how classes are actually sequenced.
Yeah, so I've seen really good attendance in my Zoom sessions and in the online. In our program in the fall, we actually moved to this kind of hybrid model where you could either come to class or attend online. And what we really found for the evening MBA program is that very few students were showing up in person. Everyone else was logging in online, and that, along with the kind of the deteriorating or the increasing numbers of COVID, and that's why we moved our winter quarter fully online, just because we found that it was a real challenge to try to teach to a handful of students in person and a larger group online at the same time. So, it's something we've played with, and really, I don't see us going back to the classroom until we can really do so safely, because we can do it online and get the same kind of effective outcomes for the most part.
And I wanted to add this thing about attendance. Just because they show up doesn't mean they show up. So that's why I try to do things when I'm teaching to make sure they're actually engaged. If the lights are on, no one's home. And so a lot of times our students all you see is their name. It doesn't mean they're there. That's one of the things I've been trying to get. As far as undergrads, you all, they're pretty smart. So if they know you're taking attendance and it's a day where we're actually online, it doesn't mean they're there. That's why I try, and it doesn't mean they're there for the entire time. And that is, I think, that is somewhat of a concern as far as where we can't see people. But I mentioned this to Kyle and Brittany and Amber before we got started, and Brian, our Kelley tech support person. The genie's out of the bottle. So we're going to have to find ways of making sure that if students are actually there, they're actually there. Where, as Kyle said, we could walk up and down the aisles. We could see if someone was engaged. We could ask a question to bring them in. We could see if they were puzzled. We've got to find ways to do the same thing online.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So have you been able to determine the differences in learning levels between prior in-class I-Core cohorts versus the spring, summer, and fall online cohorts?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question, to be honest with you. Kyle, do you understand it?
Well, are you able to compare learning outcomes from, this fall of 2020 compared to, say, fall of 2019?
Too soon yet. We're still grading.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you on some assignments, and because we changed things in our rubrics, it's like comparing apples to oranges. We had to change. I think it's too soon yet. It'd be all anecdotal for me to say that on the undergraduate level. I do know that there are some professors where they're not doing as well, but I don't know all the reasons why. I like longitudinal data more than just semester to semester. So I hate to say that, to me, it's too early to tell, in the way I teach anyway.
I think one of the challenges, it's hard to kind of disentangle the movement online, which is a challenge, but also our students are facing, because of COVID, they're facing a lot of other challenges and distractions that aren't really related to the way that we're teaching, but they're just, they're just stressed, or a lot of us are stressed in 2020. And so, all these outside factors play in, and they might diminish the learning outcomes a little bit, but that's not necessarily related to the online movement. They're both directly, a function of COVID. So it is really a challenge to kind of tease some of these things out.
Okay, and then we have, please share some best practices that demonstrate how students are learning from the creative destruction, externalities, and public policy changes spawned by the health crisis reactions. I-Core seems like the ideal laboratory for this.
Yeah, so I think I-Core is, if I can give Charlotte a second and jump in and talk about, with our MBAs, one of the things that we do is a case analysis, a business analysis to kind of start out the program. So a couple of weeks ago, we looked at a company called Black Circle Brewing, which is a brewery and event venue. They really do a lot more like in concerts and music. And they did okay in the summer and the fall when the weather was nice, and they built a patio and all this kind of stuff. They were able to adapt. But we had our students working with the owner of the company, this to get ready for what we called the COVID winter, when they were basically not going to be able to do all the things that they're able to do. And so in the last few years, Kelley is really, like with all of our programs, we're trying to increase the experiential learning that is going on in the program. And whether that's, case competitions with real businesses, whether it's, quarter long or semester long projects, capstone projects for the students working with real businesses. And we've been really conscientious about choosing businesses that have been impacted by COVID, the creative destruction, what is going on with these business models in this industry, right? What opportunities are going to come out of it? What is going on here? And so we've tried to get our students with a really hands-on approach to say, okay, you want to think about strategy? All right, well, here's a business whose business model is going to be severely upended for the next 6 months. What is their strategy? What is their marketing plan? What is their brand identity? What are the economics of the situation? Let's apply all of that to real businesses facing these challenges now. And I've heard of some awesome projects that our faculty colleagues have come up with to really, I was going to say take advantage of the situation, which sounds really bad, but economic disruption does create opportunity, and it certainly creates learning experiences.
I can tell when Kyle gets excited, so he's excited about this one. He jumped right in there. I'm glad. In 2 areas I've seen it. One in I-Corps, and I did not teach negotiations. In I-Corps, I'm not sure how I-Corps was set up when you all were at Kelley, but now instead of you creating a company in your project, we actually pair our students up with real live companies. And what I can tell from their deliverables, a lot of them have taken into account as they're coming up with their project, the COVID-19 environment and how their deliverable will be affected, whether that be marketing, whether that be ops, right? That I thought was extremely show how malleable they are and how aware they are. But when I teach negotiations, and I teach in undergrad and MBA, it's kind of funny, when I teach MBA, they're really about, I want to make a deal. They're very competitive. They come in there guns blasting, and I have to show them how collaboration and somewhat accommodation might be your best route. In this environment, it is. As various folks are trying to negotiate, let's say, leases and working with suppliers, the accommodation and the collaboration in times of crisis can make you much more innovative. So I have seen in my MBA classes, as well as my undergraduate, a much more openness to being able to explore how you need to accommodate, especially in dire situations in negotiations, where before maybe your company was the big dog, but now because of COVID-19, not so big, and you have to deal with suppliers, you have to keep your best employees, you have to negotiate your leases in a different way. Now people are much more opening to learn the ins and outs of how to collaborate for those long-term relationships and how to give and take for accommodation in the competitive model nowadays. And there are some situations where it works. The competitive model right now may not be your best bet as far as your negotiation situations. So that's what I've seen in the area of negotiations. Is how I teach it.
Okay, and then let's see, another question we have here is, what can alumni do to help faculty and students during this time?
Go ahead, Kyle.
That's a great question. And it's one we love to hear, because we want our alumni to be engaged and connecting. So there are a few things that I can think about. One is certainly we are always looking for those connections to our successful alumni who are in business, right? And so maybe that's a business case that could be developed with a company. Maybe it's connecting with our career services and thinking about how you as an alum can either if your organization is hiring, obviously there's connection there for our undergraduate students to have opportunities and have experiences, whether they be full-time positions or internships. The other thing that it's always good to just, if you've got a faculty member that you had while you're in the program and that you're still either in contact with or would like to be in contact, if you reach out to him or her and say, what opportunities are there for us to help out, that's always appreciated. That, my favorite thing in this role is getting a random email from a student who graduated 4 or 5 years ago or more and saying, hey, remember we talked about this, here's an article, or how can I help out with students? We do, to give an example, we're putting together a speaker series or have been doing a Zoom panels for our, that focus on different career outcomes and career goals, so that if one of our MBA students comes from a technical background and they want to get into marketing or they want to get into finance, once a month we'll have a panel with finance folks who will then kind of give advice and recommendations for how to get into that field and what you need to know and where the opportunities are. So you could potentially serve on a panel or, have a business case. There's lots of things out there. Just feel free to reach out to any of us and love to have it happen.
I just got two right quick because he covered it really well. We're updating our undergraduate webpage, and we heard from our students, they want to know more about you. They want to be inspired by you. Especially in times where if you have any kind of stories about maybe something didn't go so well and you were successful, you had resilience, you had grit. I mean, you remember how it was in I-Corps. Maybe you didn't get that best grade. Maybe you didn't graduate at the top of your class. Maybe you didn't get the first job you wanted. Maybe your business took a hit. They want your stories featured on our webpage. So we're going to be reaching out to alums where, just to feature you in some ways. So stories of resilience and grit and success. They really want to be able to not only hear about great things, they want to see you and be inspired by you. The second quick thing is, and this also just happened, and it made my, just like Kyle, my day. I have an intern, and she's an international student. Difficult sometimes for international students to get jobs during the summer, internships in their summer. She went on my LinkedIn page and saw one of my former, and she's in honors, she saw a former honors student on my LinkedIn page, right, as one of my, I guess, followers or LinkedIn members. And it was at a company where she wanted an internship. So out of the blue, she contacted, and he graduated maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and said, you had Professor Westerhaus-Renfrow, I have her now, and you're working at a company that I would love to work for as an intern. Just out of the blue. He got back to her. Our alums are awesome. He got back to her. They got an interview. She got the internship. So keep that going, where if we have undergrads who are reaching out to you, answer those emails. You may not be able to get them a job. They just may want to hear from you. And the way they connect to you is through our faculty. And so I think that story made my week. And then when I was sharing the story on another webinar, the student that was actually facilitating it is now a student at Bloomington. He said, you know what? I used to work with that guy too. I work with him too as well. He was awesome. And so I'm going to give him a call. So stay connected with our students. And if they reach out to you, like I said, maybe you may not have a job. They just want you to respond. And if you respond with, hang in there, you're going to be awesome. You're going to be great. It's going to be all right. There's great opportunities post COVID-19. That would make their day.
Great. So yeah, we just have a couple of minutes left here. So just a final question I was going to ask you guys is just any advice you would guys have for all of us in the workplace, and just what advice you would have managing COVID going forward.
Laughing, Kyle. What's your advice? 2 minutes.
2 minutes. One is just, keep your head up, stay safe, stay connected as well as you can, right? Like, this is emotionally draining for all of us. And I've been very fortunate that, I haven't had, health problems with me or my family, but it's inevitable that most of us will. And so just understand that this too will pass. But it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time for every one of us. And so always keep that in perspective. Then it's okay to struggle a little bit, but try to see the good in things. And, really just this is a Kelley alumni panel. I consider Kelley as part of my family. I've got degrees from Kelley. I work here. Like, it is really a fantastic community, and lean into those communities that you have, and really try to help everyone out, do all those things. So I love working here, come thick or thin, and This has been the hardest year for me professionally because, you know, we've just had to withstand so many changes, and it's nerve-wracking, but it's worth it.
All right. I'm going to say something kind of corny, but it will take a minute or two or less. I tell my students now in this time of COVID-19 that setbacks are setups for comebacks. And then I talk about the history of our country. And in my lifetime, there's been some tremendous setbacks, economically in our country, politically in our country, the social justice in our country, and in my own personal life. And setbacks actually, like resilience, it's a weight, and you try and weight to lift something, let's say with your body, it builds the muscle. And that's what setbacks do. And we like a comeback story. I don't know about you. Nobody wants to go see a movie where the winner wins in the beginning and wins at the end. Okay. It's those people who are, if you see a 440 race or a track race, that person is last and comes around the curve and hits that speed and finishes and doesn't give up. That's what this country, and I'm very, very serious. This is what our country is about. So this is a setback. There is no doubt about it. I remember the last day I was in class, it was March the 9th. And I never imagined I would never see a student's full face this many days. But I know one thing, we're coming back and it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to appreciate it so much more. And this country is going to come back, and especially will come back based on the education you got at Kelley, the kind of folks with faculty you have here, and the kind of alums. This city and this region, we will come back. And that's what people want to see.
Great. Well, yes, so that's all of the questions that we have time for today. But Kyle and Charlotte, I just wanted to thank you guys for answering all of these questions and attending today. And now I will kick it back to Amber for some final comments.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brittany. Just some final things. I just want to say thank you for everybody that joined us today. I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it. A recording of this webinar will be made available soon. And we are planning more webinars with the Kelley IUPUI focus in the near future. So please be sure to follow us on our social channels, check out our website, and check your emails for updated information. Thank you.